If you have lived long enough, you have already gone through, or maybe are right now, a time of feeling stuck, uninspired, stifled by life in some way. Today, I want to talk about that and share a solution from my own life, from working through this myself a couple of years ago. But you could be like I was in a total state of burnout. You could be feeling disconnected from the way that you're living your day to day life. It could be you've got a sense of tension, like this built up energy that just doesn't have anywhere to go. And you just know that you've got something more to give or be or do in the world, even if you don't know what that is yet. If that sounds at all like you, and this is, like I said, where I was just a couple of years ago, I have a couple of questions that I want you to ask yourself, and then we will go deeper. What if all it took to start moving in a better direction was the smallest nudge, just a moment of inspiration? What if it really was that simple? Would you give it a try? If you're new here, I am too. My name's Aaryn, and this is my first video on this channel, which I created as part of a fulfillment of this mission that I'm on to create art and other work that inspires you to explore your core values and live truer to who you are. In this video, I'm sharing with you the first step that I took to work through that same stuckness that I spoke of earlier, and the ultimate rebalancing solution that I've put into play in my own life since then, which is actually quite simple. Identify, or in my case, re identify my core values, and then act on them. And now, if you think you've heard this before, if you've been previously given lists of lofty sounding words and told to identify your values, I promise you, this is not that. And if you feel you already know your core values, I thought I did too. And the process that I'll share, it could be an interesting exercise to go through anyway, to check in on your values since you last revisited them, in case any have shifted at all. If what I have to share today makes sense to you, I hope that you experiment with it, put it into play in your own life, and see how it works. Or if it's not really resonating, maybe you can take a few of these ideas and adapt them, tweak them for your situation. And if everything that I've said so far you've just completely bounced off of, I am honestly impressed that you're still here. But jokes aside, seriously, if you're at all like me or even in your orbit, it's likely that you've been feeling some of the constraints of life, your obligations, and your responsibilities. And perhaps you're craving some more freedom to be able to express yourself that you're just not afforded in your workplace or other circles. You're probably in a job that sure pays the bills, but it may actually be draining you. Some might call it burnout. I was there a couple of years ago. Or it's at least certainly not doing anything for you. Maybe, like me, you reach a certain age. I'm in my 40s, but this isn't some midlife crisis thing. It can happen to an adult of any age. I've gone through it several times over the last 2 decades. However, it happens, you realize that you are going in a direction that just doesn't feel right anymore. There might be a sense that you've lost touch with some important parts of yourself that maybe somewhere along the line just got a little bit deprioritized, and now maybe they've been completely forgotten. And those important parts, some of those may actually be your core values. And so much of this inner conflict can arise from no longer living in a way that aligns with them. We're looking for an authenticity that just seems like it's harder and harder to find these days. So, what does that mean? What does that even look like? Well, I'll use an example that might be a little cliche, but I feel like it's relatable. Just scale it to your circumstances. Let's say you really crave the freedom to travel and see the world, but your job might only give you 2 weeks of vacation a year, and you can't really reduce your hours because you've got to pay the mortgage on your great house that you tell yourself you need in order to achieve stability in your life. In this scenario, maybe the conflict is that you value freedom, maybe novelty of experience, seeing new places and things, more than what society's version of stability and success is. But to anyone looking in from the outside, your circumstances would imply the opposite. And this is where the disconnect occurs. This is where that friction can really start to rise up. And we all know, of course, everything can't be in perfect alignment with our values about our life at all times. If you've got a family you need to provide for them, you do have bills to pay. In future videos, I'll be sharing more about how to work around those necessary misalignments that are just inevitable. But for now, we're going to focus on the first step, which is getting clear on your values first. What kicked it all off for me most recently was during some time that I was spending outside, a moment in nature, and it allowed a moment of reflection that later spilled out onto the page as a poem about home and legacy. Seemingly out of nowhere, this was nowhere on my radar. I eventually came to realize that I had spent years trying to force myself to adopt traditional values of success and achievement that really weren't mine. And in the meantime, had been neglecting those pieces of myself that really needed to be expressed in my life. Now, moments of random inspiration are great, but since then, I have continued to work with this and intentionally figured out ways to create the conditions for this to recur in my life. You have to give opportunity for inspiration to arrive. And that method that I've used several times since then is what I'm going to share with you today. First, you have to decide that it's important to you to understand and identify your values. That's it. Just decide. Second, introduce some regularly recurring mental space and silence into your life, some analog time, so to speak. And third, pay attention while this process just does its thing. So, what this looks like in practice is you begin by setting that intention that this is going to be a priority in your life. And then you just remind yourself of that a couple times a day, morning and night. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. Then give this thought experiment some space. You can't do inner work like this if you're always distracted, listening to something, doom scrolling. You need this silence so that these ideas and this intention has an opportunity to digest. Like I said, you have to give that inspiration the opportunity to arrive. For this, I suggest a setting that is very boring. Just yourself in a quiet room, maybe a window, maybe something like a park bench, a location that you enjoy and allows you just to be quiet, where you can reflect off of the environment around you. I like nature for this. It's a great mirror for me in that way. While you're here, you could be doing something such as sitting still in meditation, if that's your thing. You could be walking or perhaps even doing some vigorous exercise, whatever it takes to really clear your mind and get you out of your own head. The point is to give yourself that time, that silence, whenever you can fit it in, even just a few minutes. While you're doing this, think of your subconscious as being on your side, and it needs that quiet time to reflect, to give you little nudges, to speak to you, drop those insights. So, this is all it takes to kick off the process. And now your job becomes paying attention. Throughout your day, in these quiet times, just start to notice what comes up in your mind, thoughts, memories, things you used to enjoy doing, things you might have wanted to try but have always put off. Pay special attention to anything that gives you really strong emotional reactions, either positive or negative, or just a complete sense of calm. These are clues about what you're trying to find more of in your life. For example, anger can signal something encroaching on something that you truly value, something threatening that. Joy or calm could mean that is moving you a little bit closer to the root of what one of your values truly are. You'll have to interpret what all of these things mean for you. This is essentially a process of call and response. You'll get little clues along the way, but you will move closer to a gut feeling or an intuition about those things that truly matter to you. So, this all sounds simple, and it is. It's not necessarily easy. Some of this stuff can be buried pretty deep. You're going to have to put in the effort and stick to it. You might also have to confront some things like deeply held beliefs that you're going to need to question, or even things that you identify with deeply that just no longer hold true to who you are. Maybe they were never yours. I'll tell you how it went for me. A couple of Januaries ago, I decided to go out snowshoeing here alone on our land. We're super high in the mountains, and the winters are really long and tough, to be honest. And this was a particularly warm day, and I really just wanted to take advantage of it, get outside because I didn't know when I'd get another opportunity to. Creative writing was nowhere on my mind. I had been spending long hours at work. There was something that I remember at the time that was so important, but that was my life. Work, try to get outside whenever the weather allowed, and that was it. The snow was drifted so deep, and I chose the steeper, hilly route. I needed to take a rest and sat down on a stump. The only things I remember about that moment are the burning sensation in my muscles from hiking up that hill that took so much effort, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears, my lungs working hard, and some chickadees in the trees around me. I didn't realize what had happened then, but this is what happened. That was the mental clarity, that mental quiet that was induced through that physical effort. Hey guys, sorry, I just got to break in here and say this. In the story I'm about to tell, I got so excited about what happened next that I completely forgot to mention the main character, which was a paper wasp nest that I noticed right ahead of me, sticking up out of the snow, built in this little sagebrush. It was getting hit by the sun and just happened to be noticeable from where I was sitting. I took this picture at the time. I never thought I would be on YouTube, so sorry it's vertical, but back to the story. In that moment, and I didn't anticipate it or realize it until it had happened, but my mind had gone completely silent. I was just in a state of receptivity. And the minute that I looked at that little nest, it was like I just got a download. Curiosity about how it survived until January. What were the lives of the wasps that built it and lived there like? The emotional reflection of these thoughts and curiosities back against my own life. I couldn't wait to get back home and write about it. And then as I was writing, I remembered what it felt like to be a creative person. There's a familiarity to it. There was such a clarity around how much I value being creative, creating work, especially inspired by nature. That was such a breakthrough moment. There was also an understanding of how many events had to actually take place just the way they did in order for that poem that I wrote to exist at all, to ever come into being. That nest had to be built just there. It had to avoid so many hazards, didn't get destroyed until January, wasn't already buried in the snow. I had to walk just that way and sit just where I did in the mental state that I had in order for all of this to come together. It felt like being part of something beautiful, like something bigger than myself, you know? That experience really drove home for me in a very clear way that creativity for me was a value that I had ignored for too long. Expressing it, even in that small way that day, felt like an instant relief valve. And that's when I knew I had a direction to go in, and then I could decide what the actions I would take to fulfill and express that value in my life might be. I could start working toward them. So for me, after a lot more work and experimentation, the decision to start this channel was one of the actions that I committed to take that came directly out of that process that I've just shared with you. Everything about it is designed with this in mind, and as a project, it actually has a dual purpose. Making these videos, the branding, the photography, and associated design, this all gives me an opportunity to creatively express myself authentically, to honor that core value within myself. And it also will potentially help connect me with other people who might be inspired by the art, by the writing that I produce, in addition to what I speak about here. It's also meant to serve others, you, through storytelling, sharing my nature based art and experiences that are really meant to inspire and provoke thought and encourage you to continue exploring ways to live truer to yourself, exploring your core values. So, my wish for myself is also my wish for you. And it's really what all of the effort that I'll be putting into this channel is meant to help us both achieve. If this does resonate, I'll be going a lot more in depth on all of this in future videos, expanding on the topics that I covered today, sharing more of my reflections and thoughts on my core values and the creative process from my own journey, as well as some of the more universal concepts that I've boiled down through my experience, like the one that I shared here today. So, if that does appeal to you and you do want to hear more, then you are the person that this channel, these videos were created for. And I hope you'll come with. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.